Welcome to this cinematic explainer. Today, we're diving into something wild. We're going to uncover the truth behind a heavily censored, entirely banned book called El Dorado. This is a text that authorities actually confiscated and literally threw into the fire, all because it held the dark secrets of a mythical empire and the unprecedented rise of a legendary figure. Let's just jump right into the story.
Think about it for a second. What could possibly drive an entire government and the absolute highest levels of the military to issue a death warrant for one single man? Why would they violently try to erase him from the very pages of history? Well, the answer isn't simple. It lies hidden deep in the scorching earth, wrapped up in this intense story of blood, power, and unbelievable wealth.
Section 1. The Empire of Gold. To really understand this man, we first have to understand the myth that forged him. In 1951, two immense forces were born at the exact same time. Deep in the Kolar goldfields, farmers who were just digging a well stumbled upon a strange stone, which revealed a massive, completely untapped gold mine. To keep it under wraps, a man named Suryavarthan took over the land pretending he just had a 99-year lease for limestone mining. Clever, right? But at that exact same time, miles away, a boy named Rocky was born into absolute soul-crushing poverty. Fast forward to 1978, and global politics, specifically the Cold War tensions between the US and the Soviet Union, caused the price of gold to just absolutely skyrocket globally. Suryavarthan's secret empire suddenly became unimaginably wealthy. And it's that intense secrecy that brings us to the present day, where the government desperately bans the book El Dorado just to keep the bloody history of KGF hidden from the public eye. So, what actually drove the boy who'd eventually conquer this empire? It all comes back to a single agonizing memory, the dying words of his mother. After suffering a life of absolute poverty just to provide for him, her final wish wasn't just for his survival. No, it was a desperate plea for him to never, ever experience her helplessness. She made him promise that while he might not know how to live, he must die as the richest, most powerful man in the world. This profound trauma became Rocky's absolute life mission. All right, Section 2, The New Dawn of Bombay. To fulfill his mother's dying wish, young Rocky hits the unforgiving streets of Bombay. It was a ruthless city where the weak were just crushed, but he realized pretty quickly that begging only gets you pennies. To get real money, you need power. Starting at the very bottom as a shoeshine boy, he didn't just fight rival gangs, he audaciously attacked corrupt police officers, proving he feared absolutely no one. Through sheer audacity and ruthless violence, he swiftly took over the Bombay underworld. And the public, who were totally sick of the old corrupt system, began to view him not just as a criminal, but almost as a king. He struck fear into the hearts of established dons up and down the coast. But Bombay was just the beginning.
Rocky's ultimate target was an impenetrable fortress. The KGF Mafia was essentially a massive political chessboard, and power was divided among 5 key pillars by its founder, Suryavarthan. You've got Kamal, who handled the smelting of the raw gold. Rajendra Desai managed the massive distribution networks. Andrews controlled the smuggling routes on the western coast. Guru Pandian manipulated the government and politics to keep them all safe. And Suryavarthan's brother, Adira, handled security. But the true, terrifying heir to this entire empire was Suryavarthan's ruthless son, Garuda.
Which brings us to Section 3, the plot against Garuda. You know, an empire this insanely rich is always going to attract vultures from within. When a treacherous power struggle kicked off over Suryavarthan's failing health, Andrews, who was desperate to seize control, hired Rocky for the ultimate assassination. But taking out Garuda was no easy feat. Rocky's initial plan was to strike on the open streets of Bangalore, figuring Garuda would be vulnerable and exposed in transit. But the reality? Vastly different. Garuda arrived at the heavily guarded DYSS party office to unveil a statue. Surrounded by thousands of loyal followers, heavy police presence, and layers of tight security, a frontal assault was basically suicide. Rocky realized right then and there that he couldn't just shoot his way through. Section 4. Narachi, Hell on Earth. Realizing Garuda was entirely untouchable in the outside world, Rocky makes a truly terrifying decision. He willingly steps right into the monster's lair. He infiltrates Narachi. Now, the word translates to the goldsmith scale or thorn, But this wasn't just some physical gold mine. It was a heavily fortified hell on earth, hidden behind 600-foot walls and massive iron gates. It was built literally on the blood of the innocent. It was designed with this chilling duality, utilizing absolute cruelty while instilling paralyzing fear to maintain perfect balance and obedience. And the whole thing was guarded by the ruthless commander, Vanaram. To really grasp the horror of this place, just think about this number for a second. 20,000. That's the staggering amount of captive slaves trapped within Narachi. These were innocent people, abducted and forced to work 18-hour days deep within the earth. They were constantly watched by 400 brutal, heavily armed guards who would kill them for something as simple as making eye contact. These people were entirely stripped of their humanity, their names, and really any shred of hope. So to get close to Garuda, Rocky willingly strips himself of all his power. Think about the total 180 here. In Bombay, he was the Don, feared, powerful, dictating the terms of the criminal underworld. But in Narachi, he became just another nameless, anonymous slave trapped in a 600-foot deep hellscape. He went from absolute kingmaker to the very bottom of the food chain, where a single misstep literally meant a brutal death.
Section 5. Garuda's terrifying end.
Deep within the belly of this beast, Rocky systematically planned his impossible strike. He knew he couldn't fight an army alone, so he orchestrated a massive psychological shift. Breaking the absolute rule of obedience, he stepped forward to defend an elderly, blind slave from a brutal beating. That singular act of defiance sparked a huge wave of hope among the broken workers. Then, operating completely in the shadows, he secretly assassinated 23 guards, plunging the oppressors into total paranoia. And suddenly, the dynamics flipped. The nameless slaves began to view this mysterious, fierce stranger as their promised messiah, a savior straight out of the legends told by their elders. The despair transformed into a quiet, simmering rebellion. With the silent backing of the slaves, Rocky executes this brilliant, multi-stage tactical masterclass during a major religious festival. Step 1. He creates a massive short circuit near the heavily guarded White Line, plunging all of Narachi into total darkness and chaos. Step 2. While the guards frantically scramble around with flashlights to secure the perimeter, Rocky just slips right through a secret maintenance tunnel that leads directly beneath the palace. Step 3. He infiltrates the sacred Kali Ma ritual itself. Right in the middle of the chanting, the fire, and the massive crowds of guards surrounding Garuda, Rocky emerges from the very group meant for sacrifice. And in a breathtaking cinematic execution, he strikes down the untouchable tyrant right in front of his entire army.
Section 6. The new Sultan of KGF.
The assassination of Garuda completely flipped the chessboard of the underworld. The KGF elites, Andrews and the other pillars back in Bombay, they thought Rocky was just a disposable pawn they could use to clear the throne, and then they'd just step right in. But they miscalculated terribly. Rocky didn't just kill a king. He liberated an army. By proving he was willing to bleed and fight for the lowest of the low, he won the absolute devotion of 20,000 desperate people. He didn't hand the keys of the empire over to Andrews. Instead, backed by a massive legion of freed slaves who now saw him as a literal god, Rocky stood his ground. He claimed total, absolute control of KGF for himself. So the monster from the streets of Bombay has just become the new sultan of the world's most powerful, blood-soaked gold empire. He finally achieved the immense wealth his dying mother dreamed of. But with every political player, criminal mastermind, and the entire Indian government now realizing the massive threat he poses, can he possibly hold on to it? The true war for KGF is just beginning. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you on the next one.